Hi, my wonderful friends. I'm trying to keep the Chef Ricardo on the camera here, but I think it's better if I'm a little closer because my cheap tin horn mic. Well, it's not a cheap tin horn mic, but I think the audio is better if I'm a little closer. Although I'm a little scarier at a closer degree. Um, Supreme Court just barely split the decision about being born in America. When you're born in America, 14th Amendment says pretty much in plain English, when you're born in America, you're an American citizen. Now, um, there's, of course, on the left, there's a tremendous outrage. And my favorite person these days, Heather Cox Richardson, saying, what is the Supreme Court doing? We're reducing, like the six people are hijacking democracy. I mean, what are we doing? And you look at the 14th Amendment, it is pretty plain English, but someone else said, well, yeah, but the argument is that it was written about African Americans, about slaves, not to deny African American slaves the citizenship. But if you look in the 15th Amendment, and the 13th, 14th, and 15th are the ones right after the Civil War, and they're striking for so many reasons. But among the things that are striking is that it took three. They had to keep repeating, and still 150 years, and they're still abridging, not just denying blacks votes by virtue of the fact that they're African Americans, but abridging, which is gerrymandering is abridging. And you can make that argument, but it's an argument of words. So this is why, and I've said in other posts, that I'm so struck by Ian McGilchrist's book, the emissary and the what is it? The ruler, the ruler and the emissary, about the different hemispheres of the brain, left and right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is language, and if you have a stroke in the left, you lose the capacity for language. And it struck, it's until fairly recently, it was thought, well, that's the sum total of consciousness. But here's the right hemisphere, and the right hemisphere has been associated with more abstract thinking. Things that go beyond words, symbolism, vibing out reality. And McGilchrist uses the example of the two eyes of the birds, and you see birds have eyes on opposite sides. When you see birds, the ravens that you see on YouTube, they'll eyeball the camera from one eye to the other, and the explanation is that the eyes are associated with corresponding opposite hemispheres of the brain. And one eye was for looking at the food, the left hemisphere, looking and dealing with the food that the pigeon or the bird is eating. And the other eye is scanning the horizon, much broader point of view, scanning to see if there are any other predators that come and going to eat me while I'm dining. Somebody else wants me on their dinner plate, and let me scan over there. So there's two dimensions of consciousness, and one which is reduced to linear thinking and logic of words, and we think, well, words are pretty much the sum total of intelligence. This is where religion and spirits and kind of all this stuff that we've had even before we had a language. We've had this other way of seeing the world, the other way of summing up what we sense to be reality. So there's only so much that we can expect out of words. And you don't have to just listen to me for this. There's lots of philosophical, Wittgenstein is the big guy these days with that. But, language is a representation. It's an approximation of reality. And furthermore, it's our own personal, how we use our language and how we've appropriated our particular understanding of language is subject to some idiosyncrasies. So love, to me, you say the word love, well, and I ran into a guy, a street preacher. He said, well, and their thing was they can reduce all words to a number. And you have the corresponding number, you can just look up at this handy little religious text. That's going to tell you what God means by that word. And, do that with love, or do that with patriotism, or even murder or death. It's subject to it depends on the context. And this stands up to even the scientific method. Everything's true, and you can even make laws Well, if you drop a brick off a window, it's gonna land, and you can even calculate how fast it's gonna land. We're really clever about it, but it assumes gravity. It assumes that you're dropping it out a window on the planet Earth. If you drop it out a window on the moon, it's going to be a whole different trip. So it's you can come up with a sentence that is true, but is that sentence going to be true now and forever, eternal truth, which is what religion tends to promise, that we're seeking, we can conceive of an eternal truth. But when it comes down to practical, mortal, human flesh and blood terms, it's not so easy. There's a relative scale of truth. So you look at and we talk about the 4th of July, and I mentioned Bella and civil religion. The 4th of July is a semi-religious holiday in the United States. Why? People have died and given up their lives for our country. Nationhood is a sacred thing. So when you're banging around, you accuse each other of being a traitor. You tend to the conversation degenerates into highly emotional and sometimes irrational. Now, even irrational is a relative word. You can say, well, it was irrational for that person to strap a dynamite to his chest and blow up, an innocent bunch of churchgoers. Well, no, it's not irrational. It's horrible. It's bestial. But he's following a rationale, and the rationale may be, well, if I do this, it's going to make some statement and I'm doing something glorious. So it depends on who's doing the interpretation. It depends on who's reading the Constitution, who's reading the Bible. It can be meant to be whatever it can be argued to be. And we're very clever. This is the left hemisphere. We think we got it down. We think we got it rational. But is it right? And this is where I bring up good faith and bad faith. Sartre says bad faith is self-deception. Faith is good, but it's got to be good faith. It can't be in bad faith. You got to say, when you say, oh, did you deal in good faith? In other words, did you hide stuff that is false and is going to make the deal unfair? Well, then you're dealing in bad faith. And, arguably, it's self-deception because it's going to get found out and it's going to make for trouble. So, here we have the 14th Amendment. Here we have you get born in the United States. Well, yeah, and I know well. People coming over, I've gone to school. People coming from other countries, they got married real quick so they could have a kid here. And the kid is an American kid, okay, they're in business. They're anchored here. It's an anchor baby. Now it's done with calculation. It's taking advantage of the 14th Amendment, not necessarily in good faith. And in good faith, yeah, all right. The context was African Americans and slaves. Specifically, the 14th Amendment was very much based on the aftermath of the Civil War. But the 15th Amendment gets specific. It says it's not just blacks, it's skin color. They say specifically you cannot abridge the right to vote. If you're an American citizen, once you're an American citizen, you can't abridge. That means, super 5-hour lines, and you can't, it's illegal to give water to somebody, to an 80-year-old person that's clinging to their walker, waiting 2 hours because their voting booth has been exiled, a million miles from the city. That's abridging. That's not good faith interpretation of the Constitution. You can make the argument, you can use language, you can use sophistry, but is it in good faith? Is it true to the right hemisphere? Does it feel right? And this is where religion has a role. You can be legalistic, you can be scientific, you can come up with the best numbers, but science itself will say, look, it's contingent on presumptions. And there are assumptions that are made in the hypothesis that's got to be assumed on faith. And that faith has to be in good faith for it to be right. So that's what I'm saying, is that don't invest too much in the sacredness of the text, because it's a product of human beings. Any language is a product of the human beings, and there's I'll end with the I am a pilgrim and a stranger wandering through this wearisome land. And I have a home, that great land beyonder, and it's not, oh Lordy, not made by hand. It's, in other words, things of the Spirit are by definition not made by hand. They're not artificial products, and that's what art is. Art is a creation. It's something that doesn't exist in nature. We humans make an art of it. We create something, but it is irrevocably invested with the faults of sin, of flesh and blood. We die. We are not eternal, at least in flesh and blood version. We are ultimately not perfectly right, so don't take it too seriously. Don't take your religions too seriously, because as a art and as a product of the human brain, a religion is inevitably going to be short of understanding God. And religion itself will tell you that it's beyond our capacity to fully understand it. So don't take yourself too seriously, Mr. Preacher. Don't take yourself seriously, Mr. President. Don't take yourself seriously, me. I'm not as smart as I think I am. That's one of the things I got to keep repeating, and it's a lifetime of lessons being about it. I'm not as smart as I think I am, but I don't know everything that I don't know. There's stuff that I know that's repressed, and for some reason or other, it does, stuff. I keep making mistakes, but part of the reason suggests is that there's something uneven going on. The right hemisphere is telling me something that's not spelled out in words, but I got to keep driving and driving, and I got to have faith that I can make an improvement. But anything I come up with is subject to revision by proof and by heart, by faith. You got to do it in good faith. That's all.